Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The sun was unforgiving that afternoon, pouring its rage on the cracked pavement of the busy Lego street. Horns blared, hawkers shouted, and cars squeezed through impossibly narrow spaces. But amid the chaos sat a figure that seemed invisible to the world. A man in a battered wheelchair, dressed in torn, dust-stained clothes that looked like they had survived a decade of storms. His once polished shoes were now scruffy, mismatched, and barely holding together. His face, however, betrayed his disguise, clean-shaven, handsome, with sharp cheekbones and a jawline that could rival any movie star's. Yet it was the emptiness in his eyes that completed the illusion. People passed, glancing briefly, then looking away as if his presence contaminated the air. Lazy cripple. Go and work, a woman spat as she marched past, her child sneering at him like he was filth. Desmond gripped the handles of his wheelchair tighter, but said nothing. This wasn't just a disguise. This was the beginning of something he hadn't fully prepared for. As he sat there, absorbing the cruelty of a society that judged only by what it saw, something shifted in the atmosphere. A soft voice cut through the noise, gentle yet filled with strength. "Are you hungry?" Desmond looked up, and there she was, a young woman balancing a tray of bread and akara on her head. Her skin was rich ebony, glowing despite the heat, and her eyes carried a mixture of warmth and sadness, like someone who had tasted life's bitterness but refused to become bitter herself. Without waiting for a response, she squatted beside him, opening a small nylon bag, revealing 2 akara balls and a piece of bread. "I don't have much, but please eat," she said, offering it with both hands. For a moment, Desmond couldn't breathe. He had prepared for mockery, for disgust, but not for this. His throat tightened. The words "thank you" barely escaped his lips. She smiled gently, wiping sweat from her forehead. "My name is Amarachi. I sell food down the street. If you ever need water or anything, just wave when you see me," she added, rising to her feet. As she walked away, Desmond's eyes followed her, heart pounding in a way he hadn't expected. This wasn't part of the plan. None of this was supposed to touch his heart. But it did. Watching her walk back into the sea of indifferent faces, Desmond felt something stir within him, a strange, unfamiliar warmth that both comforted and terrified him at once. For the first time in his privileged life, someone had seen him not as a billionaire, not as a cripple, but simply as a human. Just days before, the atmosphere in the boardroom of D-Tech Innovations had been tense, yet electric with ambition. Desmond, CEO of one of the most powerful tech companies in Africa, sat at the head of the glass conference table, dressed in an expensive Italian suit, his wristwatch alone worth more than a mid-range car. His marketing team stood nervously in front of the giant LED screen, presenting the pitch that would change everything. The idea? A bold social experiment. Disguise Desmond as someone invisible to society, observe how people respond, and use the data to market their newest AI product focused on empathy-driven analysis. The concept was brilliant. The tech world was moving toward AI models that could detect emotion, predict human behavior, and drive customer interactions based on compassion metrics. But Desmond, ever the perfectionist, refused to launch a product based only on theoretical data. "If we're going to sell empathy, we need to understand empathy," he declared. His board members exchanged uncertain glances. One of them, his assistant Fred, voiced what everyone was thinking. "Sir, you're the face of the company. Are you sure you want to do this yourself? The streets aren't exactly friendly." Desmond chuckled, leaning back. "That's exactly why I should do it. If the world treats me differently because I'm crippled and poor, then our product has a reason to exist. I want to see the truth, raw, unfiltered." And so, the plan was set in motion. Makeup artists aged his clothes, dirted his skin, and created bruises that made him look like a man beaten by life. The wheelchair was custom-made to look rusty but functional. Everything was perfect, except for one thing no one predicted. Desmond's heart wasn't part of the experiment. Yet, as he sat back, remembering that meeting, Desmond stared at the piece of bread still in his hand, untouched. Amarachi's smile replayed in his mind like a song stuck on repeat. Her kindness wasn't rehearsed, wasn't for attention. It was raw, real, and painfully rare. It wasn't pity either. It was respect. He sighed deeply, glancing around as yet another person passed him and muttered, "Lazy thing." He squeezed the bread tightly, realizing for the first time that this experiment was more than business now. It was opening doors inside him that had been locked his entire life. Doors that wealth, power, and prestige had no keys for. By the third day on the street, the glamour of the billionaire life felt like a distant memory. Desmond had always known Lagos was harsh, but he had never truly felt it. Sitting in the scorching sun for hours, with no shade, no water unless someone offered, and no way to defend himself from cruel strangers, had stripped him of more than just his comfort. It had stripped his pride. A group of teenage boys walked past, one kicking the wheels of his chair for fun. See Mumu cripple. You know get family? Die there, they laughed, walking away. Desmond clenched his fists, gritting his teeth. Anger rose like bile in his throat, but he said nothing. This was what he had signed up for, or so he thought. In the corner of his eye, he spotted Amarachi again. She was arguing with a customer over 5 naira, but her smile never faded. The resilience in her spirit was unlike anything Desmond had seen. As soon as she noticed him looking, she excused herself, jogged over, and placed a bottle of cold water on his lap. "It's too hot today. Drink this." "No need to pay," she said softly. Desmond stared at her, speechless. He wanted to tell her the truth, to say, "I'm not who you think I am." But his mouth wouldn't open. Instead, he forced a weak smile. "Thank you again." She smiled, brushing off the dust from his shoulder like a sister would do for her younger brother. "Don't thank me. The world is hard enough as it is." As Amarachi walked back to her stand, Desmond leaned his head back and stared at the blue sky, his vision blurry, not from the sunlight, but from emotions he couldn't explain. His heart beat fast, and something inside whispered that this wasn't just an experiment anymore. This girl, this humble, struggling girl, was becoming the only real thing in his life, full of fakeness. But then, like a shadow waiting to pounce, the reminder hit him. His father. Chief Williams would never, ever accept this. And what would Amarachi do when she found out he wasn't who he pretended to be? Would her eyes still hold the same softness? Or would she look at him the same way everyone else did, with disgust for betraying her trust? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the marketplace, Desmond watched Amarachi from afar, his mind spinning with curiosity he couldn't suppress. She had finished her sales for the day and was now carefully arranging the remaining unsold bread back into her basket. Her slender hands moved with precision, worn but graceful. Without thinking much, Desmond gripped the wheels of his chair, following her at a slow, cautious pace. He was careful not to let her notice, weaving between stalls and dodging curious glances from pedestrians. The deeper she walked, the more the streets changed. The vibrant market sounds gave way to the hum of poverty, cracked roads, leaking roofs, children playing barefoot in gutters, and women fetching water from broken taps. Desmond's heart tightened. For a man whose life was marble floors and crystal chandeliers, the reality before him was a harsh, humbling contrast. Yet here was this woman, full of life, laughter, and kindness, navigating this chaos as though it were normal. Finally, she turned into a narrow compound fenced with rusted iron sheets barely holding together. Desmond halted at a distance, pretending to adjust his chair while watching discreetly. Amarachi greeted an elderly woman sitting on a plastic chair, her breathing heavy and her wrapper tied loosely around her chest. "Maman Kechi, have you eaten today?" Amarachi's voice was filled with genuine concern. She dropped her basket, reached into her apron pocket, and pulled out a small nylon bag of akba, placing it in the woman's hands. Desmond watched, stunned. Even with her struggles, she still thought of others. Amarachi then fetched a rusty bucket, walked to a distant tap, and after battling with a stuck valve, managed to fill it. Desmond saw her carry it on her head, balancing it with the ease of someone born into hardship, and then walked into a single room, tiny, dark, and barely holding together. The door had no lock, just a nail bent into a hook. His chest tightened painfully. How could someone with so little still have so much to give? Desmond sat there for a while longer, processing everything he had just witnessed. For the first time in his privileged life, he felt guilty, not for being rich, but for how disconnected his world was from the reality of people like Amarachi. Her daily life was a battle he could never have imagined before this. She wasn't just poor, she was strong, resilient, and selfless beyond measure. It was no longer about the experiment. The numbers, the empathy-driven AI, the company reports, none of it felt important anymore. This was real. This was the raw, unfiltered face of humanity. And as he wheeled himself slowly away from the compound, blending back into the shadows, Desmond realized something terrifying. The line between the billionaire and the beggar had blurred, not in society's eyes, but in his own heart. The following day brought a strange anticipation that Desmond couldn't ignore. For the first time since this experiment began, he wasn't thinking about data or reports. His thoughts were entirely consumed by Amarachi, her smile, her resilience, her kindness. As usual, he positioned himself at his corner of the street, waiting. Hours passed, but instead of frustration, he felt a strange nervousness, like a child awaiting a friend. Finally, as the clock crept toward midday, Amarachi's familiar silhouette appeared in the distance, balancing her tray of bread and akra. The moment her eyes met his, her face lit up with a smile that Desmond felt deep in his chest. She hurried over, brushing her wrapper with her hands. "Good morning. I was wondering if you'd be here today," she greeted warmly. Desmond smiled awkwardly, maintaining his crippled posture, though guilt weighed heavily on his conscience. I'm always here," he replied, feeling the lie sting. Amarachi sat by him, opening her tray. "You should eat. You look weaker than yesterday." Without waiting for his protest, she handed him 2 akra balls and a piece of bread. Desmond took it, his fingers trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from the growing storm inside his chest. As they ate together, Amarachi began talking about her life, how she lost her parents in a car accident when she was only 18, how she dropped out of nursing school because there was no one left to pay her fees, how every day was a battle to survive. Desmond listened, hanging on every word, guilt rising like a tide. She spoke without self-pity, her voice firm yet soft, as though she had made peace with her fate but refused to let it define her worth. As the day went on, their conversations flowed easier. Amarachi laughed more, teasing him about how serious his face always looked. Desmond laughed too, genuinely, not the polished, rehearsed chuckle he gave at boardroom meetings. But underneath it all, the tension gnawed at him. Every time she adjusted his wheelchair, wiped sweat from his forehead, or helped him straighten his shirt, Desmond felt the burden of his deception suffocate him. He wanted to tell her the truth, that he wasn't crippled, that he wasn't poor, that this entire scenario was built on a lie. But every time he opened his mouth, the fear hit him. What if the truth erased the warmth in her eyes? What if her kindness was never meant for the man behind the lie, but only for the cripple she thought he was? The thought paralyzed him more than any wheelchair ever could. Far from the dusty streets, inside a marble mansion surrounded by tall fences and armed security, Chief Williams sat in his study, a storm brewing on his face. His personal assistant stood before him, visibly trembling, holding a file that contained pictures of Desmond in a wheelchair, dressed in rags, talking to a street food seller. Chief Williams slapped the file shut, slamming his fist onto the mahogany desk. "What nonsense is this?" he thundered. His chest heaved, nostrils flared. "My son, my only son, sitting on the street like a beggar? With street rats." His voice cracked the silence like a whip. He paced back and forth, hands clenched behind him. Is this what he learned after all my sacrifices? After all the private schools, the international degrees, the billion-dollar company I handed to him? Moments later, he grabbed his phone, dialing Desmond's number. The call went unanswered. He dialed again. Nothing. His fury doubled. Without waiting, Chief Williams ordered his driver, "Take me to his office. Now." The drive felt like an eternity, every second fueling his rage. When he stormed into Desmond's office, Fred, Desmond's assistant, tried to explain, but the older man wouldn't have it. "Where is he? Where is my son humiliating this family?" he roared. Moments later, Desmond walked in, still in his street clothes, his hair messy from the day's act. His eyes widened seeing his father. "Dad," he started, but Chief Williams raised his hand. "Don't dad me. Are you out of your mind? Do you know what you're doing to our name, our empire? You're sitting on the street like a common dog." Desmond tried to explain the AI launch, the experiment, the purpose behind it. But his father wasn't listening. "Shut up. Shut up," he screamed, slamming his palm on the desk. "You're mixing with filth, with nobodies, with girls who would sell their womb for 5 naira. His words were knives, cutting through the air, slicing through Desmond's soul. Desmond stood his ground, clenching his fists. "She's not like that. You don't even know her," he snapped back, his voice shaking but firm. But Chief Williams laughed, a cruel, mocking laugh. "And you think she loves you? Wake up, Desmond. She loves your pity story. Wait until she finds out who you really are." With that, Chief Williams straightened his suit, pointing a finger. "End this madness, or I will." And with those final words he stormed out, leaving Desmond staring at the door, torn between two worlds, one of wealth and pride, and one where his heart had accidentally found something real. The morning after his father's outburst, Desmond sat in front of his dressing mirror, staring at his reflection. The man who looked back at him was no longer the polished billionaire, nor was he truly the beggar in the wheelchair he pretended to be. Instead, he was caught somewhere in between, lost in a web of lies he hadn't intended to spin so far. He should have told Amarachi the truth the day their conversations grew longer than just greetings. But now, the weight of that truth had become a boulder sitting on his chest. His hands trembled slightly as he changed into his beggar disguise again, the ragged trousers, the faded polo, and the old canvas shoes with one sole halfway torn. His wheelchair stood ready by the corner, its paint chipped, its wheels squeaking slightly, a perfect prop for a lie that had become his reality. Stepping out onto the busy street once more, Desmond wheeled himself toward the corner where Amarachi usually spotted him. As the noises of the bustling market engulfed him, a strange mixture of anticipation and guilt tangled in his stomach. Today, more than ever, he knew he wasn't doing this for the experiment anymore. He was doing it for her. He needed to see her smile, hear her laugh, and feel her presence to remind himself that not everything in his life was fake. When Amarachi's silhouette appeared in the distance, his heartbeat accelerated. She waved, grinning widely as she hurried over. "I was hoping to see you again today," she greeted breathlessly, lowering her tray beside him. "You won't believe the crazy customer I had this morning," she began, launching into her story. As she spoke, Desmond found himself laughing, genuinely laughing, something that felt foreign in boardrooms and gala dinners. Yet every time she adjusted his wheelchair, brushed dust off his shoulders, or bent to hand him water, Desmond felt a dagger of guilt twist deeper in his chest. She treated him with a kind of care that was rare, not because he was rich, not because he was handsome, but because she believed he was broken, vulnerable, and deserving of dignity. That realization broke him inside. He wasn't being fair to her. Every laugh, every conversation, every look they exchanged was built on a half-truth, on a version of himself that didn't exist. But every time he opened his mouth to confess, fear paralyzed him. What if she looked at him with the same disgust others did once the truth was revealed? What if she believed he had been mocking her the whole time? The thought haunted him. So, like a coward, he chose silence, and the lie continued. Amarachi hadn't meant for it to happen. This strange, persistent pull toward the man in the wheelchair. She had told herself it was simple kindness at first. Nothing more. After all, she had always believed in helping people, even when her own pockets were dry and her stomach empty. But as the days turned into weeks, as their conversations stretched longer, and as laughter began replacing awkward silences, she realized her heart was playing a dangerous game. Each time she saw him waiting at the corner, his hopeful eyes scanning the crowd for her, something bloomed in her chest. Something that scared her more than poverty, more than rejection. Was she falling for him? And how foolish was that? A crippled man, a beggar, what future could they possibly have? Her mind battled her heart every day. The logical part screamed that it was stupid. How could she think about love when her own life was in ruins? When she lived in a leaking room with no guarantee of food the next day? But then she would remember his smile, that boyish, genuine smile that somehow made the entire world melt away. He wasn't like other men. He didn't judge her. He didn't belittle her for selling bread or for smelling of fried oil and dust. In his presence, she felt seen, not as a poor girl trying to survive, but as a human being. And that feeling was addictively dangerous. She began looking forward to their conversations more than anything else in her day. Still, the guilt of her feelings gnawed at her. Each night, as she lay on her thin mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, she whispered into the darkness, "God, please, if this isn't right, take these feelings away." But morning always came, and the feelings were still there, stronger than the day before. She convinced herself that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't wrong. Maybe love didn't have to come with conditions, with perfect bodies or perfect bank accounts. Maybe it was about connection, and she had that with him. Or so she believed. Little did Amarachi know that the very foundation of their connection was built on something fragile, something that could shatter her heart into pieces the moment the truth was revealed. Desmond found himself doing things he never imagined. Waking up with excitement to sit in a rusty wheelchair, dressing in rags, and waiting on a dusty street corner, not because of the social experiment anymore, but because Amarachi had become his entire reason. Her presence was like a balm to his soul, healing wounds he didn't even realize he had. They began spending more time together, sometimes sharing food under the small tree by the roadside, sometimes walking, or rather, with him wheeling alongside her, as she did her rounds selling to customers. Desmond began noticing her habits, how she always hummed a tune while counting money, how her laughter was louder when children passed, how she always greeted the elderly first, no matter how busy she was. Every little thing about her fascinated him. But with each passing day, the weight of the lie grew heavier. Every time Amarachi wiped sweat from his forehead, adjusted his crumbling wheelchair, or defended him against mocking passers-by, Desmond felt a part of his soul crumble. She was loving a man who didn't exist. Yet, the fear of losing her kept his mouth shut. He justified it at first, telling himself he would reveal everything after the experiment was over. Then it became after the product launch. Then, after I'm sure she really loves me. But deep down, he knew he was lying to himself. The truth was simple and terrifying. He didn't know if he could ever tell her. Because if she left, he wasn't sure he could survive it. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Chief Williams watched, plotting. His anger hadn't subsided. It had only transformed into a cold, calculated determination. He was a man who built empires from the ground up, crushed competitors, and shaped politicians with a single phone call. There was no way, absolutely no way, he would watch his only son throw everything away for a roadside girl. If he won't end it, I will, he muttered, picking up his phone. As Amarachi and Desmond laughed under the shade of that tree, oblivious to the storm brewing, neither of them realized that their peaceful little world was about to be ripped apart, not by poverty, not by disability, but by the merciless hand of power and pride. Chief Williams sat in his gold-plated office chair, staring at the CCTV footage his private investigator had gathered. His jaws clenched, fingers tapping the glass table rhythmically. Watching his son laughing with a poor food vendor, a girl who, by his standards, was no better than the dust on his shoes, ignited a rage so deep it burned through his veins. He stood, straightened his silk agbada, and signaled his driver. "Take me to the girl," he commanded coldly. His car, a black bulletproof Range Rover, glided through the streets like royalty passing through slums. When it pulled up in front of the tiny stall where Amarachi sold bread and akara, heads turned. People stared, whispered, and speculated. Chief Williams stepped out, his shoes alone worth more than Amarachi's entire life savings. Amarachi was arranging her tray when she noticed the intimidating presence approaching. Her heartbeat quickened. Men like him didn't visit people like her. "You're Desmond's father," she stammered, her voice trembling slightly. Chief Williams didn't waste time. His lips curled into a fake smile as he reached into his pocket and threw a white envelope onto her tray. The envelope was thick, stuffed with fresh Naira notes. 50 million Naira, he announced sharply. Take it. Start a new life. Open your shop. Travel abroad if you want. But leave my son alone. His voice was filled with poison disguised as politeness. Amarachi stared at the envelope like it was a snake. Her lips quivered, confusion and disbelief flashing across her face. For a moment, the temptation poked at her. 50 million could change her life. No more hunger. No more leaking roofs. No more insults from the world. But something in her chest flared. Anger mixed with dignity. Her fingers clenched, and with shaky hands, she picked up the envelope, then shoved it back into his chest. I'm not for sale, she whispered, fighting back the lump forming in her throat. I never wanted his money. I never even knew who he was. I loved the man I thought he was, not what you people think he is. Chief Williams' eyes narrowed, his fake smile dissolving into a scowl. You'll regret this, he spat. Girls like you don't belong with us. You will never be part of my family. Without waiting for her reply, he turned and stormed back into his car. As the Range Rover disappeared into the horizon, Amarachi's knees buckled. Her hands trembled. Tears stung her eyes, not from fear, but from the cruel reminder that even love had to battle the monster called class. The morning after the encounter was unlike any other. Amarachi woke up to the sound of her neighbor pounding on her wooden door, shouting her name. Amara, Amara, open the door. What is this I'm seeing online? Amarachi scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. She flung the door open and was immediately met with a glare of her neighbor's phone screen. Her own face stared back at her from a viral gossip blog headline. Crippled billionaire son trapped by ruthless gold digger. Exclusive photos inside. Poor food seller allegedly targets billionaire empire. Her legs nearly gave way. Her mouth went dry. What is this? Who did this? She whispered. Her neighbor sighed, shaking her head. It's everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, blogs. Even radio is talking about it. The comments section was brutal. These poor girls will do anything for money. She's disgusting. Targeting a disabled man to climb out of poverty. Shameless street girl. She should be arrested. Amarachi's vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. Her hands shook as she refreshed the page repeatedly, hoping it was a nightmare. But every refresh showed new insults, new mockery, and more strangers dragging her name through the mud. Customers avoided her stall. Some crossed the road when they saw her, others whispered loudly, ensuring she heard every cruel word. Nah dem. Pretending to care for disabled people, but it's all for money, someone sneered as they walked by. Amarachi stood frozen, her lips trembling. She had never known a pain like this, a pain that wasn't just physical but emotional, soul deep. Meanwhile, Desmond, seated in his luxury penthouse, slammed his laptop shut, fists trembling. His phone buzzed nonstop, journalists, business partners, old friends, all calling, questioning. Desmond, what's this nonsense? A cripple? A poor girl? Is this true? Even worse, his father's cold voice rang through on one of the calls. I warned you. This is only the beginning. Desmond gritted his teeth. His heart bled for Amarachi. He knew his father was behind the media circus. The old man had weaponized the press to destroy her dignity. Without hesitation, Desmond called his lawyers, called the media, ready to fight for her. But deep inside, one truth haunted him more than anything else. He had made it worse by not telling her the truth himself. If only she knew he wasn't crippled, if only she knew everything. 2 days later, as Lagos still buzzed with gossip and speculation, Desmond sat in the back of his armored SUV, his hands clammy, his heartbeat uneven. His driver navigated the narrow roads leading to Amarachi's compound. The moment the car pulled up, people peeked from their windows and doorways. Whispers floated through the air. He didn't care. He stepped out, not as the cripple in the wheelchair, but as himself. Tall, handsome, perfectly dressed. Amarachi, sitting by her tray with her head down, looked up in shock. Her eyes widened when she saw him standing, walking. For a split second, confusion flashed across her face, but before any words could escape, Desmond fell to one knee, pulling out a velvet box with a sparkling diamond ring. The crowd gasped. Some screamed in excitement, others in disbelief. Desmond's voice trembled as he spoke. Amarachi, I've made mistakes. I've lied by omission. But one thing that has never been a lie is how much I love you. Will you marry me? Silence filled the air. Amarachi's hands covered her mouth. Her legs wobbled. She was still processing the whirlwind of the past 2 days, the media insults, the humiliation, the betrayal of trust. And now this? A proposal? But as tears welled in her eyes, her heart spoke louder than her fears. Despite everything, she loved him. Deeply, foolishly, hopelessly. Slowly, trembling, she nodded. Yes, yes, she whispered. The crowd erupted, some clapping, some murmuring in disapproval, others recording for social media. But not everyone celebrated. Far away, inside his mansion, Chief Williams sat watching the live video streaming on Instagram, his jaw tightening, his hands clenched into fists. You stubborn fool, he muttered. You think this is over? You think you won? No, this is only the beginning. He picked up his phone and began dialing numbers. Get the media. Get the lawyers. Get everyone. If my son won't listen, the world will listen. I will make sure she regrets ever thinking she could belong in my family. As Amarachi and Desmond hugged amid cheers and flashes, neither realized they had just declared war, and the battlefield would be far crueler than anything love had prepared them for. The days following the proposal were a strange mixture of joy and anxiety for Amarachi. On one hand, she was engaged to a man who had not only stolen her heart, but also shattered her perception of what life could offer. On the other hand, whispers, judgmental stares, and the constant drone of social media attacks haunted her every step. Her engagement ring, sparkling on her finger, was a constant reminder of the dream she now lived and the nightmare she was trying to outrun. Desmond reassured her that things would get better, that the noise would die down. But what neither of them realized was that a storm was quietly brewing behind the smiles of false supporters and the flashing lights of cameras. Chief Williams wasn't a man to accept defeat, not even from his own son. While Desmond busied himself preparing for a small engagement party to formally announce their union to friends, colleagues, and a select group of media outlets, Chief Williams was orchestrating a different kind of event. Through carefully crafted phone calls to journalists, popular bloggers, and media houses, he fed them details, not just about the relationship, but about the greatest secret Desmond had hidden from Amarachi. Make sure every camera is rolling. No angles missed, he instructed his PR team coldly. The plan was simple. Let the engagement party proceed. Let Amarachi believe she belonged, and then destroy her in front of the very crowd she thought now accepted her. For Chief Williams, this wasn't just about protecting family legacy. It was about teaching a lesson, one that Amarachi and everyone in the lower class would never forget. Desmond, oblivious to his father's trap, spared no effort to make the engagement memorable. He rented a beautiful event center, not overly luxurious, just elegant enough to suit Amarachi's simplicity while still reflecting his status. Guests arrived dressed in traditional attires, mingling, taking selfies, and enjoying the ambience. Amarachi, dressed in a simple but stunning wine-colored lace gown, walked in shyly, holding Desmond's hand. Her natural hair was braided into an elegant crown, her skin glowing under the soft lights. For a moment, despite the stares and whispers, she felt beautiful, chosen. Desmond whispered into her ear, "You deserve everything good, my love." She smiled, believing for once that perhaps love really could conquer class. As the event reached its peak, with guests laughing, cameras flashing, and toasts being raised, an unexpected hush fell over the hall. The side doors swung open, and in walked Chief Williams, flanked by his personal security and a handful of elite journalists with cameras already rolling. Gasps echoed around the room. Some whispered, "That's Chief Williams," while others shifted uncomfortably, sensing that his presence wasn't for blessings. Desmond froze, his grip on Amarachi's hand tightening. His heart sank. No, not here, not today, he muttered under his breath. Amarachi's smile faded instantly, sensing the change in atmosphere. The older man adjusted his agbada, his eyes cold, scanning the crowd before locking them directly on Desmond and Amarachi. With a voice loud enough to command silence, Chief Williams stepped toward them, raised his hand to halt the music, and addressed the room. Before we proceed with this charade of an engagement, he paused, letting the weight of his words settle. There's something the bride-to-be, and all of you, deserve to know. Amarachi blinked, confusion tightening her chest. Guests murmured. The bloggers leaned forward eagerly, their cameras zoomed in. Chief Williams paced slowly, theatrically, like a predator circling prey. Then, he turned sharply toward Amarachi. Did he tell you that he's not crippled? The words fell like a bomb. The room gasped. Desmond's eyes widened in horror, his mouth opening, but no words coming out. Chief Williams continued mercilessly. Yes, my dear, the man you thought was a helpless beggar was never crippled. It was all a lie, a game, a social experiment. He turned to the stunned crowd. He sat on the streets, pretending to be disabled, to see how society treats people like you. Then he faced Amarachi again, his voice dripping with cruelty. And you? You were just part of the experiment. A willing participant who never knew she was nothing but a case study. Amarachi stood frozen, her face draining of color, her mouth trembling. Her fingers loosened from Desmond's hand, which now felt like fire on her skin. Whispers exploded around them. So he was lying all along? A game? Oh my God. Amarachi's breath became shallow as her legs wobbled, her eyes filling with tears. The betrayal hit deeper than words could ever capture. Amarachi stood there, her eyes darting between Chief Williams and Desmond, her vision blurring as tears welled uncontrollably. The walls seemed to close in. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, struggling to contain the storm of emotions tearing her apart. Confusion, anger, humiliation, heartbreak. Desmond reached for her, desperation written across his face. Amara, please, let me explain. It wasn't like that. But his words were drowned by the pounding in her ears, like war drums announcing the collapse of her world. No, tell me this isn't true, she choked out, her voice cracking. Tell me he's lying, please. But Desmond's silence, his trembling lips, and the guilt in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. Her hands flew to her mouth, a sharp cry escaping her lips, not a cry of weakness, but of a soul breaking in real time. So all this time, I was just a joke? A poor girl you could play with because I'm beneath you. Her voice trembled but cut through the hall like a knife. Desmond shook his head furiously. No, Amara, please, it started as an experiment, yes, but it stopped being that the moment I met you, the moment I... Don't, she screamed, stepping back. Don't you dare say you love me. Don't. Her hands trembled violently as she yanked off the engagement ring, staring at it like it was a snake that had bitten her. Her knees gave out, but she forced herself to stay standing, swallowing the sobs, threatening to escape. With the strength of someone who had nothing left to lose, Amarachi extended her shaking hand and dropped the ring at Desmond's feet. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "You broke me worse than life ever did." Then, turning to Chief Williams, she locked eyes with the man who orchestrated her public crucifixion. Congratulations. You got what you wanted. Without another word, Amarachi ran out of the hall, her sobs muffled only by the laughter of gossip-hungry guests and the flashes of camera phones capturing every second. Desmond collapsed to his knees, staring at the ring, his hands trembling, his breath ragged. Around him, the buzz of whispers grew. She thought she could climb out of poverty with a ring, foolish girl. Rich men always play with their toys. And amid the noise, one reality hit harder than anything. He had broken the only woman who had ever loved him beyond his wealth. By dawn, Lagos had swallowed the scandal whole. Amarachi woke up to the horrifying sound of voices outside her leaking window. Loud, cruel, and unrelenting. "Come out, gold digger," someone yelled. "Come and teach our daughters how to trap a billionaire cripple," another mocked. Her hands trembled as she opened her phone, only to meet headline after headline screaming her shame to the world. Cripple scam. Billionaire's dirty social experiment exposed. Bread seller fooled by fake beggar, love or greed. She fed a cripple, only to find he was never one. Shocking. The comment sections were a hell she never imagined. This one is finished. Who told her she could be one of them? Gold digger levels unlocked. She got played and deserved it. Small girl with big dreams. Tears spilled uncontrollably as Amarachi hugged herself, her back pressed against the wooden wall of her one-room apartment. Every message was a dagger, every post another slap to her dignity. Her neighbors, who once greeted her with warm smiles, now stared from a distance, whispering and chuckling, as though watching a tragic film unfold. She tried stepping outside to fetch water, but the moment her feet touched the ground, someone spat close to her. Shameless, a woman hissed. Children pointed, mimicking a cripple on a wheelchair, while others mocked her voice. She staggered back inside, shut the door, and collapsed to her knees. How had her life collapsed this quickly? How could one secret destroy her existence so completely? Meanwhile, at the Williams mansion, Chief Williams sipped his coffee while watching the news roll in, with a smirk plastered on his face. His personal assistant chuckled as he handed him printed copies of trending articles. Exactly as planned, sir. The public has turned against her. The older man chuckled darkly. Perfect. Let this be a lesson to her and every other gutter rat thinking they can climb into my family. But far from sharing the satisfaction, Desmond sat in his penthouse, broken beyond words. His phone buzzed nonstop with journalists, business partners questioning his sanity, and board members threatening to resign. But none of that mattered. Not the money, not the business, not the world. Only one thing mattered, Amarachi. And he had destroyed her. Worse than his father ever could. By evening, Amarachi's phone rang. The number was unknown, but curiosity and desperation pushed her to answer. Hello, came her shaky voice. The voice on the other end was calm, authoritative, and terrifyingly familiar. It's me, Chief Williams, the older man began, his tone as smooth as poison wrapped in silk. I hope you've enjoyed the media attention. But let me make something clear, girl. This is just the beginning. You think what happened at that engagement party was bad. If you don't leave my son alone for good, I will make your life worse than death. Amarachi's fingers dug into her skirt as her body shook. Please, haven't you done enough? She whispered, but her plea was met with a cruel chuckle. Oh no, Amarachi, you haven't seen anything yet. Do you know how easily I can destroy the likes of you? I'll have your shop seized, your name blacklisted. Even the ground you walk on will reject you. Men will fear to look at you. You'll become the punchline of every joke in this city. Walk away now, and I might let you disappear quietly with what's left of your dignity. Her throat tightened, but something flared within her, a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief that a human could be this cruel. I never asked for your money. I never wanted any of this. I just cared for him, she sobbed. But her pain only fueled Chief Williams' venom. Care? Girls like you don't care. You saw a crippled man and thought it was your chance to escape poverty. Your little act fooled him, but not me. Now listen carefully. Leave. Vanish. Or Lagos will become hell for you. The line went dead. Amarachi's phone slipped from her fingers as she gasped for air. Her legs gave out, sending her crashing to the floor. She crawled to the wall, hugging her knees as sobs racked her fragile body. Why me? God, why me? She cried into her palms. Her heart felt like it was being crushed under the weight of betrayal, humiliation, and the cruel reminder that even love had rules in this world, rules written by the rich and powerful. She wanted to run, to vanish, but where? How? Her face was everywhere. Her story was now a global circus. Her dignity was gone, her life shattered, and her only crime was loving someone she thought saw her humanity. For days, Desmond paced his penthouse like a madman. His once pristine living room, decorated with fine art and marble, now looked like a storm had passed through, paper scattered, wine glasses broken, pillows torn from being hurled in frustration. His calls to Amarachi went unanswered, texts left unread or outright ignored. Every attempt to see her was blocked by her neighbors or her locked door. His heart bled. He had imagined every worst-case scenario when this started. The media backlash, his father's disapproval, the class wars, but never this. Never her eyes looking at him like he was a stranger, a monster. He sat on the floor, head in his hands, whispering, "What have I done? What did I do?" Over and over like a man drowning in his own guilt. His business suffered. Clients pulled out of deals. Board members resigned in protest. Social media continued to drag him. But none of it mattered. "She's all that matters," he muttered, gripping his phone tightly. Meanwhile, Chief Williams enjoyed every minute of it. Sitting in his leather chair, he scrolled through Twitter with satisfaction, reading the comments. "See what happens when you mix with pigs," he chuckled. Then made another call to further spread fake narratives, that Amarachi was a scammer, that she had approached Desmond knowing he was the billionaire heir, and that everything was her calculated plot to trap him for wealth. His team of influencers and bloggers did the rest, feeding the fire. But amidst the chaos, Amarachi sat in her dark room, curtains drawn, eyes swollen from endless crying. Her body felt numb, her heart shattered beyond repair. She couldn't eat. She couldn't step outside without fearing cameras or whispers. She hated Desmond. She loved Desmond. She hated herself for loving him. Over and over, her mind replayed that day, his silence when his father exposed the truth. "Why didn't you tell me? Why?" she screamed into the empty room. She wondered if her life would ever know peace again, if the laughter, the kindness she once offered the world would ever return. But deep down, she feared the truth more than anything, that no matter how much she hated him, her heart still belonged to him. Chief Williams sat in his private lounge, legs crossed, a sinister smile playing at the corners of his lips as he stared out through the glass wall of his mansion. His plan had unfolded flawlessly. Amarachi was broken, humiliated, and isolated. Desmond's company was suffering, his reputation dented, and the cracks in their father-son relationship had deepened beyond repair. Yet, even after all the disgrace, Desmond refused to renounce the poor girl. He refused to walk away. "Stubborn boy," Chief Williams muttered, shaking his head. But he wasn't finished, not even close. This wasn't just about destroying Amarachi. This was about control. About reminding Desmond that love was a privilege reserved for their kind, the wealthy, the powerful, not the street. And so, the next phase of his plan began. In a family meeting organized under the guise of mending fences, Chief Williams called Desmond to the mansion. Desmond, drained, battered emotionally, but still defiant, showed up. His face was paler than usual, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights spent thinking about Amarachi. He entered the dining room, expecting another round of scolding, but what greeted him instead made his heart freeze. Sitting elegantly at the table was Cynthia Okafor, daughter of Chief Williams' longtime business partner, a woman whose beauty was as sharp as her pedigree. Tall, fair-skinned, immaculately dressed in a designer gown, and with an air of calculated grace, Cynthia smiled at Desmond like a predator eyeing prey. Chief Williams stood, beaming proudly. "Desmond, meet Cynthia, your future wife." Desmond's jaw tightened, his fists clenching. "What?" he hissed, his voice barely contained. Chief Williams gestured casually. "You heard me. Enough of this street girl nonsense. Enough shame. Enough disgrace. It's time you married someone who belongs in our world. Someone who won't drag our name into the mud." Cynthia's smile never faltered. "I've always admired you, Desmond," she purred, reaching out to touch his hand. But Desmond jerked away as though burned. Rage boiled in his chest. "You think you can just replace her?" His voice cracked between fury and heartbreak. Chief Williams' eyes narrowed. "She was never yours to begin with. Let this be the end of your foolish rebellion. This is your future. Accept it or prepare to lose everything." Desmond stood there, suffocated between duty, pride, and a heart that refused to forget Amarachi. As the dinner continued with awkward, forced conversations, Desmond sat rigid in his chair, barely able to breathe. Cynthia giggled softly at her own jokes, twirling her wine glass between her fingers as if the situation was perfectly normal. Chief Williams talked business, deliberately ignoring the storm brewing inside his son. But Desmond heard none of it. His mind was elsewhere, thousands of miles away in his heart, sitting in a tiny leaking one-room apartment where a girl named Amarachi sat, probably crying, probably hating him, yet unknowingly holding every shattered piece of his soul. His eyes stared blankly at his plate, hands trembling under the table. Every fiber in him wanted to get up, walk out, and run to her. But what would he even say? After everything? After the lies, after the betrayal, after the public disgrace? Cynthia leaned in closer, lowering her voice just enough for only him to hear. Whether you like it or not, Desmond, I'm the woman you're going to marry. I always get what I want. Her words were dipped in arrogance, her smile dripping with entitlement. Desmond turned his face slightly, meeting her eyes with a glare sharp enough to cut steel. You will never be her, he whispered back coldly. Never. But even as he said the words, his fists balled tighter under the table, and a painful lump formed in his throat. Because deep down, he feared that no matter how loud his heart screamed for Amarachi, the walls his father built, the walls of power, wealth, and control, were too tall, too strong, and far too suffocating. Far away, in her dark, suffocating room, Amarachi sat in silence, staring at the engagement ring she had thrown back at Desmond, now placed quietly on her table, returned to her by someone who found it outside the hall. Her swollen eyes stared at it, her heart shattered beyond words. Why does love hurt the poor more than hunger? She whispered to no one. Her phone buzzed with yet another headline. Desmond Williams moves on. Family introduces new bride candidate Cynthia Okafor. A tear slipped down her cheek. Her fingers brushed over the screen, hovered over Desmond's contact, and hovered, but she couldn't bring herself to call. She couldn't. The wound was still bleeding, and it wasn't just a cut, it was a scar that might never heal. And as the screen faded to black, both Desmond and Amarachi sat in different corners of the same city, drowning in the same pain, a pain that neither love nor time seemed ready to heal. To be continued in part 2. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.